Hello friends, welcome to the Abrams Children's Books Fall 2021 Preview Nonfiction Edition. I'm Jenny Choi, Director of School and Library Marketing. Do you know John Horse? Me neither. That is until I read Glennette Tilley Turner's latest book, A Man Called Horse. John Horse was a famed chief, warrior, and diplomat of Seminole and African heritage who played a dominant role in Black Seminole affairs for half a century. For context, the Black Seminoles are the descendants of Seminole Indians, free Black folks, and escaped enslaved people who formed an alliance and lived in Spanish Florida during the 1800s. As a young man, John was involved in 2 of the 3 Seminole Wars fought between the U.S. Army and the Seminole and Black Seminole people, and he spent a good portion of his adult life as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, working to provide his people with a home where they could be free. It's the careful attention to detail, right down to the design motifs and colors, that I really appreciate about this book. Author Glennette Tilley Turner is a recognized authority on the Underground Railroad. She spent years researching the book and was even able to have it vetted by John Horse's great-great-nephew, Dub Warrior, who is shown here with the author, as well as other authoritative folks. She says, when people think of the Underground Railroad, they envision the journey of a few people at a time, traveling at night, guided by brave people like Harriet Tubman, people who went from house to house until they reached freedom. However, the Underground Railroad is more than that. It includes large groups of people yearning to be free and who openly fought against their enslavement. I hope you'll pick up A Man Called Horse and some of these other fabulous nonfiction offerings you'll hear about next.
Hi, I'm Gloria Amescua, and I'm so happy to be able to talk with you today about Child of the Flower Song People, Luz Jimenez, daughter of the Nawa. First, I want to say that I'm thrilled that Duncan Tonatiuh is the illustrator. He has brought this book to life with his unique style that's perfect for the text. This is a biography about an indigenous girl who listened to the stories of her people, their joys, their struggles, their survival, and she wove it into her heart to share with future generations. Luz wanted to be a teacher, but the Mexican Revolution changed her life drastically. She, her mother, and sisters had to flee to Mexico City and try to make their living there. Luz was fortunate to find a job modeling for artists, and she became well sought after by famous celebrated artists of the 20th century, such as Diego Rivera, Jean Charlot, Tina Modotti, and many others. They wanted to show the true face of Mexico rather than the one the European version represented. Through them, she met scholars who also wanted to know about the traditions and the history of the Nawa people and to learn Nahuatl from her. She was very fluent in Nahuatl and Spanish, so she was able to help them as they wrote down the stories that she told them. They considered her the living link from the ancient Nawa to the modern world. She was also known as the spirit of Mexico. She was represented in so many ways. Luz had a difficult life, but she found joy in what she was doing. She loved telling her stories, and she had a deep pride in her traditions, her history, and her language and culture. I hope that she realized that she became a teacher after all, in teaching in these various ways, teaching about her people, because she was a teacher, and her teachings have gone beyond her lifetime. I hope that readers of this book feel that through Luz Jimenez, she showed the strength and beauty of her people. And I hope readers feel that same pride in their own traditions, their history, their culture, and their languages. So I really am thankful to have been able to write this book, and thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Don Tate, and I am the author of more than 80 trade and educational books for young readers. Pigskins to Paintbrushes is my newest picture book biography for young readers. It's the story of football player turned artist Ernie Barnes, whose artwork often appeared on my favorite childhood television show, Good Times. Of all the biographies that I've written, Pigskins to Paintbrushes is probably the one closest to my own heart. Like Barnes, I was a young artist. Like Barnes, I was not good at sports, and I often felt inadequate about it. This is the opening scene in the book. I featured young Barnes, who was indeed a misfit among many of the other kids in his community. Take a look at his face. I tried to capture so many emotions here. Ernest was probably sad. He's fearful. Maybe he's even ashamed. He's definitely lonely. He's not a part of the in crowd. In some people's minds, boys are supposed to act in a certain way. Boys are supposed to do things in a certain way. When I was a kid, I was not athletic. I was quiet. I was sensitive. I could not dribble a basketball to save my life. In this opening scene, I picture Ernie separated from the other kids. His body is turned away from them, indicating the anxiety that he likely felt. The other kids, they look happy. I know what it's like to want to be a part of all of that happiness, but to be separated by your own insecurities. In this scene, I imagine that as Ernie stands there looking on at that basketball game, he questions himself, like I often questioned myself. Why can't I conform to this athletic idea? Ernest Barnes was a large kid, and at first I even shied away from portraying him as a large kid. I didn't want to make any of my readers feel uncomfortable. But then, I started to give it a bit more thought, and I realized the importance of portraying Ernest the way he described himself. I think it's important for all kids to see themselves represented in books. Diversity includes all types of skin colors and cultures and religion and gender identities and, yes, body shapes. What I hope my readers will take away from this story is the importance of being true to themselves and not allowing others to define them. Ernie Barnes became a successful football player in the professional leagues, but he also became a successful artist. He grew to be a man successful at being himself, and so did I, and so can my young readers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Annette Pimentel, author of Pura Cuentos, How Pura Belpré Reshaped Libraries with Her Stories. My pathway to this book began about 10 years ago in Bosnia, where our family was living. We enrolled our daughter in a local kindergarten. We hoped it would help her learn Bosnian. That, of course, is a long and difficult process. And day after day, she came home sad. It started to break my heart. Then her teacher suggested I do English language story times with the entire class. It was only a few minutes each week, but everything transformed for my daughter. Her new friends saw her differently and heard her stories. Pura Belpré was a pioneer of bilingual story times. I feel a deep debt of gratitude to her and feel honored that I get to tell her story. I was fascinated by the ways the Harlem Renaissance shaped her work in expanding the canon of children's literature. She was an amazing thinker and library activist, not only bringing the library to kids, but also reshaping the library to fit community needs. I recently interviewed a man whose family had moved to the mainland from Puerto Rico before he was born. When he was a boy, he used to attend Pura's story times. Even though he's in his 60s now, he vividly remembers the power and delight of her stories. In fact, he choked up as he told me about the magic he felt when he heard stories from his family's homeland in his mother's tongue. I love the way Maggie Morales' illustrations show Pura moving, always moving. One of Pura's colleagues told me about the magic of watching her move as she told a story. One time, she had been dubious about a story that Pura was planning to tell. She thought the story seemed really boring and like kids wouldn't like it. But then she watched Pura move as she told the story. Her voice, her hands, her entire body made the story come alive. That story became a mainstay in her own story times once she understood how to move while she was telling it. Another part of Maggie's art that I love is that hidden behind the book jacket is a completely different case cover. That little secret reminds me of the things that Pura did. She used her stories to recognize and honor the hidden, tender, interior lives of children. I hope that our book helps all children feel that their stories are honored and worthwhile. That is the legacy of Pura Belpré.
My name is Tonya Angel, and I am an illustrator and an artist. I've been painting for over 25 years. I had the amazing pleasure of illustrating this book, Your Legacy, one of the first pages, which happens to also be one of my favorite pages in the whole book, because it's not only introducing you to this beautiful, scenic, lustrous setting in Africa, the way that you would imagine it might look like, but it's also kind of showing you the colorfulness of our ancestry, and it's introducing you to some of the various languages from that same ancestry from across that continent. But mostly it's introducing you to a moment in the day when everyone's greeting each other. It's sort of like the hello introduction page. I really loved researching the languages and then figuring out how I can express the speaking of the language without something as blatant as thought bubbles, while also sort of exhibiting the energy of the spirit of the people at the same time. The wonderful thing about being an artist is that you can create a poetry with paint and movement and the rhythm of that movement. I have to mention also that I am a self-taught artist. The composition and these sort of details like this are things that I've taught myself by just observing the world around me and starting off as one of those little kids who was very quiet in nature, but was looking and observing and taking in everything around me, and then taking it back home and figuring out a way to draw and interpret that thing. At the time that I read the manuscript, I could see instantly the author, her direction in what she was doing with this book. It was going to be monumental. It was what I had been searching for my whole life, a story that would share the truth of our history and show the true greatness of our people in a light that emphasizes the strength and the resilience of our people, to show the depth of our intellect and our ingenuity and our resilience as a people is life-changing for someone like my daughter, who's 9, a little Black girl in America. How could you look at a book about all of these people that look like you who have changed the world, even without recognition most times, and made our lives better without it changing yourself, without you changing, without you understanding your possibilities.
Hi, I'm Alexander Kaufman. I'm a journalist and the author of Earth's Aquarium. The story behind the book actually begins in March 2019 when I was traveling to the Brazilian Amazon on a reporting trip to write about the ongoing deforestation there and the threat that posed to indigenous communities and to the global climate. But while I was there on this small silver motorboat cruising up the Tapajós River, a murky estuary of the Amazon River, I was just floored by the animals and the plants that I saw in front of me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, having not traveled to that part of the world before. There were colorful pairs of macaw parrots cruising overhead. There were little baby mata turtles swimming on the shores as we were riding in the boat. And there were some giant lily pads, bigger than anything I had ever seen before. And I was just in awe of this. And when I returned, I found myself with my two nephews and niece, who are quite young, Ryder, Julian, and Vivian. And I was just trying to describe what I saw there. You know, I was sparing them some of the harsher details of what I recorded on there, but I just wanted to share with them this outstanding flora and fauna that was unlike anything that any of us grew up with, having, you know, lived most of our lives in the northeastern United States. And that is what inspired me to tell the story behind Earth's Aquarium. Throughout the book, we travel to 15 different aquatic ecosystems. We go from the Amazon to the sea ice in the Southern Ocean, to the mangrove forests of Thailand, to the estuaries of Canada. And throughout that, we encountered just fantastic and beautiful creatures and plants that I think really show the value of not only understanding these vital ecosystems around us, but preserving them. And that's what I really hope will be the takeaway here, that, you know, these are incredibly intricate and complex webs of life that include creatures unlike anything some of us have ever seen before. And my hope is that as children will read this, that they will get a taste for that, and that it will really whet their palate for even more intense scientific exploration of these things, and even more so perhaps a desire to preserve them and keep them around for many generations to come. So I hope that you enjoy the book as much as I did researching it. And I hope that you enjoy the beautiful illustrations that Mariana Rodrigues did to really bring this story to life. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nansubuga Nagadya Isdahl, and it's a pleasure for me to share a bit more about writing Nelson Mandela for First Names. Given that Nelson Mandela was primarily known for his many noted accomplishments in the fight for freedom in South Africa, he spent 27 years in prison as a freedom fighter. He helped to usher in democracy and dismantle a terrible system of racial discrimination. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. He became the first Black president of South Africa. I think both as a reader and as a writer, I was compelled by the idea of unpacking those experiences that helped to inform his path as a leader, those formative experiences, of which there were many. So he grew up a country boy and had his own insecurities about not fitting in once he moved in with his wealthy uncle. He defied this same uncle and ran off to the big city in search of bigger and brighter things. So he was ambitious and was yearning for something more. He was also very sociable. He loved music, he loved to dance, he was a boxer, and he was very tied to his culture. So actually we learn in the book that it was when he was in high school that he started to think about race and racism and his own culture and certainly his own agency differently. And I hope that all of the stories in the book that happened before he became known as Nelson Mandela, the icon, provide some framing for his motivations and his incredible resolve, and also show that he was a complex man with many contradictions. He had weaknesses, as we all do, and still he was able to affect such meaningful and profound change, not just in South Africa, but of course around the world. And aside from Nelson the person, I also think that the circumstances into which he was born were also very compelling. So he was born into a royal family. He came of age at a time when Black South Africans were really starting to demand change. Once he joined the fight for freedom in South Africa, you had all of the hijinks and subterfuge and international intrigue of a spy novel. All of this against the backdrop of course, of apartheid, which was so dehumanizing and so brutal that it was inevitable that forces would rise up to challenge and ultimately dismantle it. And so I think and I hope that the book offers something for all readers. Those interested in thrillers and espionage, there's plenty of that. For those that are interested in issues of social justice, certainly there is that. And for people who are just interested in learning about a new culture, there's also plenty of that. It's all there for you to enjoy, and I hope you do. Thank you so much.
Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my new book, Crazy Horse and Custer, Born Enemies. I wanted to tell this story about these two boys and how they were born in cultures, warrior cultures, two different cultures. One is Native American, that's Crazy Horse's family and culture. The other culture is white American culture, and that's the culture, the society that Custer is from. I first became excited about the setting of the American West, where this story takes place in the 1800s, when I was a boy, back in the 1950s. My mother had a photo album, and in that album were pictures of my ancestors, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and this, for example, is one of the photographs that I saw of my great-grandmother. Her name was Kiziwin, and she was a full-blooded Native American Lakota Indian, and she belonged to Sitting Bull's tribe. My great-grandmother married a man named William Presley Zahn, and they raised a family of children that I am related to. William Presley Zahn served with Lieutenant Colonel Custer in the Army in the 1800s. But lucky for him, he was honorably discharged and left the Army before Custer and Crazy Horse met at a place called the Little Bighorn in Montana. The story that I've written starts out with young Custer as a boy and follows him growing up as a teenager and becoming a man and joining the American Army. The story at the same time follows Crazy Horse's childhood. Starts out with him as a little boy. He grows up and becomes a teenager. Interestingly, Crazy Horse was a mixed blood. He was half Anglo, half white, and half Native American. And that creates kind of an interesting drama that you'll have to read about. When Crazy Horse was about 13 or 14, there was a conflict that took place in his village, but it left him confused and troubled about what he was supposed to do when he saw this culture of white people and his people smashing into each other. And they really did clash head to head. So Crazy Horse decided to go on a vision quest. He was just a young teenager, maybe 13 or 14 years of age. And on his vision quest, he has this experience. It's like a dream that helps him decide what he's going to do as a young man. You can see a horseman riding through a thunderstorm, and you can see young Crazy Horse lying on the ground there on the left. Many different accounts have been written about Crazy Horse and about young Custer. In fact, movies have been made, documentaries have been made, and I did a lot of research for this particular story. I traveled around the country. I not only went to Montana, where the Battle of the Little Bighorn was fought, but I went back east to where Custer grew up as a young boy. When a historian is writing a story, it can be a challenge because there are many books, for example, about Crazy Horse and Custer, and they don't always agree with what happened back in the 1800s. I've read a lot of books, and I hope that I've managed to separate the myth, the legends, and find the truth, the real history, the nonfiction part of the story of Crazy Horse and Custer.
Hello, my name is Candacy Taylor, and I am the author of Overground Railroad, The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel in America. And the adult version was released in 2020, and now we're releasing the version for young adult readers. And I'm thrilled because I spent 8 years on the road looking at these Green Book sites. The Green Book was a travel guide that was published for Black people during the Jim Crow era. And I traveled over 50,000 miles throughout the United States, going to these communities and seeing the state of what these Green Book sites look like today, how many are left, and what we are dealing with in terms of social and physical mobility for Black people in America. So it wasn't just a book about a historic travel guide. It was really important for me to take this material and bring it to today. And so I'm thrilled that we're actually producing this book for a young audience, because it goes into these neighborhoods that many have either heard about, especially in the wake of the George Floyd tragedy and everything that we're dealing in terms of race today that they may see or hear from their parents is going to be echoed in this book, along with this really rich, incredibly invigorating and exciting history that a lot of Black people, a lot of Americans, people of all ages and races, aren't familiar with, because the Green Book was really just a new discovery in the last 10 years for even historians. So it's exciting to merge both the history and the present, and to take this knowledge of what it means to be not just Black in America, to be part of any marginalized community, and how you have been treated historically, and what's echoing today, I think, is a dynamic, evolving narrative that we continue to have as a country. And to bring young readers in to this narrative, I think, is very exciting, because they're going to be determining the policies of tomorrow. And I think being at that age group, when you are more conscious, you're a little self-conscious about who you are, what you look like, how you're being judged in society, I think it's a very tender age to take in this material and this history and empower yourself with it. So I hope you enjoy the book, and I'm thrilled that you took the time to listen to this. Thank you.